All right, folks, you are listening to the Yishai Fleisher Show here on Facebook, YouTube, and the Land of Israel Network. And let us get ready together for Yom Yerushalayim. Maybe one could argue one of the holiest days and one of the most important days on the Jewish calendar, because maybe it fuses a sense of, on the one hand, nationalism, the capital of the Jewish people, Jerusalem, the remembrance of a war, the 6-Day War, which is a nationalistic moment of the modern state of Israel, but with the yearnings of more than 2,000 years, and therefore a religious sense to it all. And I guess folks that are self-described as religious Zionists feel like for them, the greatest of days, something like a type of Yom Kippur, where here's the holiest day on the calendar, here's Jerusalem Day, where it fuses, on the one hand, modern nationalism, the rebirth of the Jewish state and land of Israel, but with holy yearnings for a third temple. So let's get ready for Yom Yerushalayim, and we have with us, of course, our beloved Rabbi Mike Feuer. Rabbi Mike, welcome to the program.
Oh, I feel so good. You called me beloved.
Yeah, that's right.
Hi, Yishai. How you doing?
I feel good. I guess I'm feeling beloved because we are about to discuss Yom Yerushalayim, as I put up here on the screen, Jerusalem Day. Just to make it clear for people what we're talking about, Jerusalem Day is a day. It's a modern holiday, if you will. It's remembering the victory of the Jewish people of Israel in the 1967 Six-Day War, which, by the way, you're covering on your other show right now, the intro to, on your other show called The Jewish Story. Let me bring it up.
I'm in deep, man. I'm in deep. It's so complicated to try to
you are in deep.
All the threads.
Right. In fact, your last show, I would say, was very, very packed full of information, and I had to listen to it twice, actually, in order to kind of get through the different threads. If the threads are the Cold War, which people oftentimes, when you think about Jerusalem Day, you're not thinking so much of the Cold War, but the Cold War was 100% a 6-day war event, and even more so in the following war, which is the Yom Kippur War. Mm-hmm. Which was truly a Cold War battle where actually the various superpowers were going to arm the what do you call it? The not puppet war. What's it called?
Client states. It's a proxy war.
Right, proxy war. Proxy war. That's exactly
the phrase you're looking for.
Right. So that was definitely something that happened during the 6-Day War as well. But Yom Yerushalayim, while it's a modern holiday, also has an ancient root. And I wanted to bring up a psalm for a second here. Let me remember how to screen share on this thing. And I just wanted to bring a psalm into our reading. And this is Psalm 137, which says, I'll read in the Hebrew and we'll translate together. It's very famous. It's really one of the most famous of all psalms. It says, Al Neharot Bavel, by the rivers of Babylon. Sham yashavnu gam bechinu. We sat down, yea, we wept. Why? Bezachreinu et Zion. We remembered that we were taken out of Zion. We remembered Zion. Al aravim betocha talinu kinureinu. Upon the willows in the midst thereof we hanged our harps. Kisham shalunu shovenu. For there our captives asked us, divrei shir. Why don't you sing a song? Vetoleleinu simcha. And our tormentors asked us to mirth. They said, Shir ulanu mishir Tzion, sing to us of the songs of Zion. It's like Samson, like bring Samson out, let him like play before us. We can laugh at how we've blinded Samson. We can laugh at you and how you used to have nice songs about Zion. It's a very poignant image. Echna shirat shir Hashem. But we ask, how shall we sing the Lord's song al admat nechar in a foreign land? And then more personally, if I forget thee, Jerusalem, let my right hand forget her cunning. Let my tongue cleave to the roof of my mouth. If I don't remember you, if I don't put Jerusalem above on the tops of my joys.
Joy.
Okay. Now here's an important thing. Schor Hashem.
Here's the less PC part.
Right. Zechor Hashem, remember Hashem, Livnei Edom, remember the children of Edom, et Yom Yerushalayim, the day of Jerusalem. And the reason I'm bringing this out is to show that indeed Jerusalem Day is a very ancient concept. They said that these Babylonians, Aru, raise it, Ada Yesod Ba, until its foundation, destroy it till its very foundation. Bad Bavel Ashduda, O daughter of Babylon, that is, the translation here is destroyed, but I think there's a different way to translate it, right?
No, shduda? No, that's what it means.
I feel like Shduda also means like in a modern terminology, it means like bankrupt. Like you've
been Shoded is a brigand or someone who sort of like forcibly robs others. So
right.
It's not just generally destroyed. You've been emptied out.
Right. Ashrei she'yishalem lach et gmulech shegamat lanu. Happy shall he be, he that repayeth you what you have done to us. He who avenges what you've done to us. And here's the tricky line.
Biblical image here.
Right. Ashrei, happy shall he be, sheyochaz, that will hold onto v'nipetz et olalayich ala sela, and dashes or destroys or smashes your little ones et olalayich ala sala, upon the rock. So takes your babies and smashes them ostensibly.
Yeah.
But I have a different explanation for this, which I think works maybe better, which is olalayich also comes from the word alilah, which is the tale, the narrative.
Mm-hmm.
Happy is he who takes your narrative, your fake story, and smashes it on the rock. Right? It's an alilah. It's an alilah. You have a fake story about us, that you've destroyed us, that you've replaced us, the various replacement theologies. There's replacement theology in their Christianity. There's replacement theology under Islam. And I think today there's something called replacement narrative under the Palestinian story. And
I would also argue that secular Western humanism in many ways has a replacement element in the way in which we sort of as a people fit their narrative.
Right.
That's,
blessed is he who takes your narrative and smashes it.
I mean, it's certainly more pleasant. Although I wouldn't shy away from the fact that one has to see a thing for its roots as well. That the Bible's culture is a culture of real struggle, and where people's destroyed each other. And today, what I hear and what you're pointing out is that oftentimes, because thank God we've sort of like left a culture, most of us, not all of us, left a culture where you would smash the heads of babies to destroy them. We think that the world is a better place, but the reality is that you're pointing out that, careful, because the reality is that war is still as total, if it's not as immediately brutal. And so therefore, destroying one's children physically or destroying them sort of spiritually and intellectually through capturing their narrative is also destruction.
Yes, 100%. It is 100% an effort of destruction. And I wanted to bring up that psalm just to kind of also show. It's interesting that the psalm says Jerusalem Day is the day of its destruction. Jerusalem Day is the day that you guys took us out of the land. Jerusalem Day is the day where we remembered the Jerusalem that was. And today's Jerusalem Day, same name, Yom Yerushalayim, is the Jerusalem where it's like, remember that Jerusalem that was destroyed? We're back.
Yeah, and it poses a deep question when I hear it, because the problem with the sort of like the conflict orientation is that total war demands way more than an instinct for survival. Right? If you're in a complete war, and by the way, it only takes one side to be in a total war, because like if one side's in a total war and the other side's not, that's called defeat. Right? So if you're in a total war, you have to be fighting for more than just survival. You have to be fighting for victory. And that vision of what victory is, I'm really struggling with this right now, because I was actually writing this morning, this time period that led up to the liberation of Jerusalem was a time period of deep confusion in Am Yisrael.
Right.
Like, what are we trying to do? There's some part of the state of Israel, I'm speaking now, although I'd wager it's true for the people of Israel in our dispersion. There's some part of us whose willingness to wield power is dependent upon a sense of absolute desperation. We don't want to wield power unless our back's to the wall. Right? What I call the morality of 1948. Like, okay, fine. Like 7 Arab nations jump us so then we'll use power. But as soon as that immediacy of a threat to our existence dissipates, first of all, we begin to undermine and question what it is that we did. And second of all, we show ourselves unwilling to have a vision to wield power in the name of righteousness, justice, heroism, all those things that, and so it's one of the reasons I think that Jerusalem Day, to this day, sadly, with the exception, as you pointed out, of a very narrow segment of our population, it hasn't caught. It has not caught. I mean, could you imagine such a thing? 2,000 years Jews have been saying, Im eshkechech Yerushalayim tishkach yemini. If I forget Jerusalem, 2,000, and they meant it. Suddenly you've got it, and it's like, well, I don't know, because the truth is, it was like a messy, and the consequences. Okay, folks. But a lot of that has to do with the fact that we don't appreciate the reality that when it comes to narrative warfare, there is a place to say, I'm not just going to wait until you get my back to the wall. I'm going to proactively attempt to shape a world which I believe is reflective of our mission and the divine vision for humanity. And that's what Jerusalem's about.
I think
I'm bugged by it. Spent the whole morning writing about it.
I think there's a tension between mythology and reality. And when you have for 2,000 years a Jerusalem that you dream of, but it becomes mythologized, when you get the real thing, it's shocking, it's surprising, it's messy, it's dirty, and it's also very, very, very. It no longer is in the realm of mythology. Mythology can be very high and very, very
pure, clean, morally safe,
heavenly, and suddenly it's like I didn't know that. You use the word a lot of times, which is re-embodied. So a myth is like a soul, and to suddenly throw it back into a human body or throw it back into a Jerusalem, into an actual Jerusalem. And you see that the word Jerusalem and also the word Beitel or Bethel is oftentimes used as a name for synagogues or churches or places like that, because people can mythologize that and say, well, this place represents Jerusalem now. To have a real Jerusalem to have a new Yom Yerushalayim, not the old kind of Yom Yerushalayim, is a really tricky moment.
Listen, I don't doubt the trickiness or the complexity, and frankly, I think we're doing fairly well, considering it's only been 50 years since we liberated Jerusalem, and it is 2,000 years that we were missing it. Right. I want to just make that clear. At the same time, what you're pushing on is the essential mission of the Jewish people in the world. Myth has no meaning if it can't be lived in physical life. And this is where we parted ways with early Christianity. And to this day, much of the idealist side of Western culture is that ideas lack meaning until they're put into action in the world. And this sort of notion, well, but yeah, you're going to sully the idea by trying to make it real. It's okay, but you know what? Well, like that's who we are as a people. That's our definition of faith. That's how we engage God in the world. Right? The Jewish question is not, do you believe in God? The Jewish question is, did you put on tefillin this morning? You know what I'm saying? Like the belief in God is an abstraction. This is a wonderful thing. I don't knock anybody who's a believer. But that's not the Jewish definition of faith. The Jewish definition of faith is, are you faithful to that belief through your actions? In the same way, Im eshkechech Yerushalayim, our faith to Jerusalem is not a purely, I haven't forgotten, etc. That's why, by the way, how do people fulfill for the last 2,000 years our pledge not to forget Jerusalem?
We break a cup. We say we say it. We bless Jerusalem over our food and over the stuff. We
leave a corner of our house unpainted.
Leave a corner of our house, right?
Women are meant to wear slightly less jewelry than they otherwise would. Meaning, there's a whole list of actions that we do in the world which embody what we're missing, and that's the faithfulness. Not just like, oh, Jerusalem. It's like, no, I need to feel it, and it's a challenge. It's been 2,000 years. But the reality is we held on strong enough that when push came to shove, against a lot of logical international pressures, etc., right? The leadership of Am Yisrael gathered in the basement of the Knesset, driven by Menachem Begin, as we'll speak about, please God, at some point, said, it's time. It's time. All the logic, all the good reasons not to do this pale in comparison to the pledge that we've been living for 2,000 years.
Right. And yet you pointed out, though, that a lot of people aren't there yet. Exactly. They're not seeing that awesome moment. And so, well, I have a theory that the different parts of the state of Israel and the Jewish people celebrate in different ways the same celebration. Yeah. One is Yom Ha'atzmaut, which is Independence Day, and that's more of the secular Israelis who really celebrate independence and the rebirth of the state as an entity that gives us the aspect of the state of Israel, which is important there, which is a safe haven from enemies, an army, a mechanism of self-determination, aliyah. So okay,
which
so
was
you have
labeled as the third temple by the early Zionists,
right,
the early leaders of the state.
but it doesn't have overtly religious connotations. It has
That's precisely my point. It embodies that whole dream in a concrete, down-to-earth, like you said, economy, government, army,
right,
a people like any other.
Right, people like any other. But then you have Jerusalem Day. Well, maybe I'll go first to Lag Bomer. Then you have Lag Bomer, which is maybe the exact opposite, which is the victory of Torah, of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's Kabbalistic mystical Torah over the Roman exile of the Jewish people from the land of Israel. It's like, we're back. We're studying our ancient Torah in our land. We beat you. You exiled us. We had to put our...
Can you hear me? I got you now. I got you now.
You can hear me, but I cannot hear you. Hold on 1 second. Here you go. Speaker.
Can you hear me now?
To internal speakers. Rabbi Mike, can you hear me now?
I hear you now. Do you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you. That was a weird moment that we had. I think it's just a little hot for all the equipment.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Can I tell you a secret? I like this heat.
Yeah, it's okay. Yeah. It's
like
quite
it.
hot here in the land of Israel. So it is very hot. We are having a super heat wave, which was clearly meant by God to burn out the remnants of the COVID virus. Is that not the answer?
Or just get a good schwitz on. Either way.
That's right. So we were saying that the second holiday is the Torah holiday, and the third holiday is the fusion of. Maybe you can help me explain that. The third holiday is Yom Yerushalayim, which is the religious Zionist version of it, which is like a fusion of the state on the one hand, but in the Holy Land, specifically with a vision for a national temple.
Yeah, I mean, in that structure, if you're going to say that Yom Ha'atzmaut is the elevation of the physical, and even at a certain degree to the expense of the spiritual. I mean, calling the state the third temple, I understand in the sense of the fulfillment of 2,000 years of longing, but it's a failure to understand what the temple actually represents. Because it's like, we're going to be a people like any other. Meron is an elevation of the soul over, Rome, and it's a denigration of the body. Rome is the body, the Torah is eternal, it's the soul. We're going to be, there with Rabbi Shimon. It's also, by the way, a misunderstanding of the story because, of course, Rabbi Shimon, that was his attitude when he came out of the cave after 12 years. But God sent him back for the 13th to understand the next piece, which is the fact that as Rav Kook teaches, that anyone who breaks the continuity between the physical and the spiritual, who sees them as disparate, is essentially a heretic because what they're doing is they're saying that God thought this was worth creating, but not that. Right? That God specifically put us in the world with the ability to take action, because that is a sacred act as much as the classically religious soul-oriented acts. So I would say that the vision of temple is a place where the physical is infused and becomes the seat for the spiritual, as not as a disparate element. Which, listen, by the way, that's where religious Zionism really hangs up. It's a tough sell. And not only a tough sell in the educational standpoint, but it's a very difficult negotiation of values to live. I don't want to slide into politics, but it's one of the places where we've really run into trouble.
I would argue that the reason that we've run into the trouble is we actually didn't go full Monty on it.
In what sense?
In truth, if you think about it, at least this is the way I live my life, and it like I always feel very fulfilled from it, and I think other people would be as well, which is it's quite organic. It really works very well together. If you think about it, it's a very full picture. It's like you have the godly promises and they're coming to fruition. Then you built up a state. The state has done these things to move forward the godly process. And it's like, if you think about it, it only doesn't really work if you bifurcate it. If you bifurcate it, then it becomes really kind of like, then you're like, wait a minute, did I steal somebody else's land? Or is this state supposed to be really a state of all its citizens? And you really get confused. Or you're confused from the religious, which is hard for me to understand. But let's say
should I be saying Hallel on
right.
How would you do that? With a bracha, without a bracha?
Right.
I hate that.
Or the major refrain, which is, we're all still in Galus. We're all still in exile. Just the fact that you're geographically in Jerusalem means nothing. It's meaningless because we're all not in a messianic process yet.
I'm sorry that I filter out. I'm just like,
okay, but that's a huge amount of people that say that. That's a huge amount of people.
Yeah.
It comes at the end of the day from the same place, which is a bifurcation of today's reality. And one could also, by the way, Rabbi Mike Feuer, right? A lot of people, you could blame the religious Zionist world for really not bringing a deeper consciousness of the fusion between, and Jerusalem Day is a perfect example. You said it yourself. That fusion has not been bought into by everybody. And one could say, you know what?
We haven't allowed it to really transform us. We're trying to dance at two weddings. This is what I meant, is that as opposed to going, if you said full Monty, I'll go whole hog, as long as we're using very strange expressions to refer to such a sacred thing. Instead of going whole hog, we've tried
whole hog Zionism. I like
whole
that.
Hog, well, that would sell in very particular places.
Full Monty Zionism.
That even less so. Unfortunately, most people don't know what that actually means.
See the movie.
Yeah, or just Google it now. So come on, focusing here, people. So the reality is that for many of us, the challenge is religious, because the reality is that the way we know how to live Torah in the world is a product of exile. It's an organic product, meaning it's an evolution from the roots of the first temple, the second temples, all the way back to Sinai. But its form, its sort of phenotype, if you will, the form it's taken in the world, was formed in exile. How much do we really let ourselves go into that organic process of continuing to reform? Very little, right? That's one side. The other side is that historically, at least, religious Zionism hasn't put forward a vision of how to structure and run our country. Right? It's always been satisfied to be a bit player. And you're seeing, by the way, that bill came due quite clearly in the recent coalition negotiations, where Netanyahu has basically said, oh, yeah, well, I can do it without you. I got other bit players. They're easier to deal with. And, of course, he historically always likes to be the most right-wing member of his government. And so here you go. Where are they now? So there's a lack of full acceptance. And part of that is like, because it's kind of hard to really believe. Really, Mike, you really believe that that we're going to transform human consciousness, restructure the globe, and finally usher in the dawn of sort of messianic harmony that we've been dreaming about? Yeah, I do. or we're all going to just see the other vision of the Messiah. Let's not forget that our sages also see 1,000 years of peace when the planet gets to rest, because humanity isn't troubling it any longer. Because that's what I see at this point. So we've reached a point in human history where the planet will survive. It's always important about people. We're going to destroy the planet. We're not going to destroy the planet. We're not going to destroy the planet. We're going to destroy ourselves. The planet's going to survive. It might be a little bit less beautiful than we came, but sorry, Arav, but it ain't going anywhere. We, on the other hand, have no such promise. Right? And so we're at a point in human history. Forget my messianic religious notions. Just read the papers. Look at the science. The opportunities and the dangers that we face today. And the COVID was a great wake-up call. Hey, folks, one planet. Hey, folks, some guy in China eats a bat. You've seen that meme floating around? Anybody who believes one person can't change the world has never eaten a live bat, right? Like, it's a little bit sick, but you see the point, right? Like, hey, folks, like we could do this, or we could do the other thing.
Well, speaking of doing things, and you also mentioned Netanyahu, we are actually in yet a latter part of the 6-Day War is still being fought now over the issue of sovereignty, which is really asserting sovereignty, or what the detractors call annexation, of those lands that were liberated in the 6-Day War.
Absolutely.
So it's still being fought.
Although that was the point, if you've been listening to the show, that was the point I made right at the beginning, is that where you say a war begins and where you say it ends actually tells you what you think it was about. Because what you just pointed out with quoting Psalm 137 is that the 6-Day War began when the temple was destroyed and we were driven from our land. Because we were on an inevitable arc back to our home. Right? And so then to think that it ended when Harabai Biadenu and the paratroopers entered Yerushalayim is a deep mistake. And then, of course, you look at the last 50 years, because we have failed to appreciate the challenge to the entire structure of human society, at least Western society, frankly, the challenge to the structure of Western society that is represented by us returning to our home. Notice the threats to Edom in that poem, right? Since we failed to appreciate that, we haven't done the work to sell it to our own people, to educate, forget selling it, to educate people. And by the way, this is the last piece, is we don't appreciate the demand it's making of us. The demand is not to forget anymore, Im Eshkechei Yerushalayim is not sufficient. We have to remember.
That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying. You got good at remembering the past. You got good at crying over it. You got good at
forgetting.
Right.
You got good at not forgetting. Remembering is a much more active stance.
Right. Well, the good news is that there is a organic movement in the right direction, generally speaking. I would liken our time to when Joshua came in with the Jewish people to the land of Israel. They set up a tabernacle. The tabernacle was the synagogue, the mini temple of the time. It wasn't the full thing. It wasn't the final thing. They were used to a tabernacle in the desert. That's what they knew. That's what the Torah told them to do. That's what they knew. To set up a temple, it took a big leap. That leap was not done by the judges or the early prophets. It wasn't done by Joshua. And it wasn't even exactly finally done by King David, although King David is the one who is that great transition. And he transitioned the whole story from a tabernacle to a temple. He was able to make that transition between diaspora Jewry fully, even though they had been there for a few hundred years, from that to a temple consciousness, a centralized Jewish people in the land of Israel. In many ways, we've leapfrogged their experience because we jumped right back to Jerusalem. We didn't go to...
Yeah.
Or maybe you could say that on the other hand, the Tel Aviv thing is a little bit like... Because in Israel, Tel Aviv is considered the spiritual and economic... Not spiritual, cultural and economic head of the country, the center. But... we have leapfrogged it. By the way, there is a move right now to move more government offices to Jerusalem. They've moved more media back to Jerusalem. A lot of the media outlets are actually moving to say from Yerushalayim, that they're broadcasting from Yerushalayim. So there is definitely a movement in the right direction, but it's still the period of the tabernacle before the temple.
So I'm going to hone in on your metaphor. I'd say we're not in the time of Joshua. We're in the time of the judges. I remember I once asked one of my teachers, like, how could it be that you read Joshua and there's this like very almost idealistic picture of the conquest that's presented? We came in, we kicked butt, 31 kings, boom, let's set up camp. And then you like turn the page to look at Judges, it's like, whoa, the Canaanites are everywhere, civil war, we can't seem to even like build on what we got, we can't get more, we can't even hold what we have, and like there's this like chaos. And so I asked him, like, how could that be? And he said, well, you have to appreciate that the spiritual energy it takes for the Jewish people, for Am Yisrael, to reroot ourselves in the land involves a diminishment of our capacity. But once we strike root, so in Joshua, he's like, we came in and we drilled in, and then it was, I just want to just like sit under my fig tree and my vine. Very similar to a lot of the portions of our society today. But the reality is that that rooting is so deep that once it begins to really give us strength, then the process, of course, is David unites the tribes. And that's the stage that we're at right now, is that how do we begin to craft a vision of peoplehood, of mission, of moving beyond just a Judaism into an Am Yisrael, right? But not an Am Yisrael like a nation like any other, but like really Am Yisrael, right? And craft a vision which can actually bring us together. Because remember, the temple is the expression of that. It's not the driver of it. And that's, by the way, there's a big piece in the sovereignty movement that I would like to see spoken about, which is that I think that because our mission now is no longer local, unlike in the time of David and Solomon, where the model was like, go local and grow, meaning the world wasn't connected. The Chinese never heard of us. In North America, they certainly weren't aware, etc. But now it's a global mission. The very fact that stuck in the middle of the question of our sovereignty is a people who claims to be the native populace, right? It poses the question at the heart of our sovereignty: how do we relate to the nations of the world? How do they fit into our story? Something which in exile we were never particularly interested in dealing with.
Right.
And so I think it really behooves us to see.
Well, we were interested in that question, but backwards. We were interested to understand how do we.
Well, because they were the context. Correct.
Right. They were the context. Right.
They have the malchut.
I very much agree with your point. I think it's a very good point. And on Twitter, which is a place I hang out in, I find a lot of enemies, but I find a lot of friends out there in the world. I'm in touch with the Iranians. I'm in touch with all Palestinians, certainly, Saudis. There's this Saudi blogger, Twitterer,
right? Super persecuted.
And I'm talking about the guy, I think Mohammed Saud, who like sings these songs to Israel. He's one of the most beautiful folks I've ever seen. And he sings songs in Hebrew in order to and he's dressed in full Saudi regalia. And you're absolutely
gotta be a lot more comfortable in this heat than what I'm
wearing. Oh yeah. Oh, they know heat. They know heat over there. So you find a lot of people that are with us, but when it comes to, of course, the question of the people that we administer,
who are living right there,
who are living right here and right there, and just they are part of our landscape. You're totally right that there hasn't been a comfortable. So yesterday I tweeted out a picture of myself at the mechanics. I was at my mechanics, and my mechanic is a Russian Jew who speaks a pretty darn good Arabic. He's got 2, sometimes 3 Arab workers, and next door is a Moroccan caterer, and he comes in and he makes like coffee in the garage. Garage guys, you it's fun to hang out in garages.
Sure.
And he speaks a fluent Arabic.
Yeah,
because he was born in Morocco. The Arabs there and the Russian guy, and they're laughing and they're talking and they're working and I took a picture of it and I was just like, this is the Middle East. This is beautiful. This is the place that and I wrote, don't let the lefties fool you. Hebrew nationalists know coexistence. That's what I wrote. That was the language that I used. And I just
go ahead. I'm sorry for your thought.
I just all I mean to say is there's a question of legal standing now that we have to figure out. And I personally believe very much in when I moved to America when I was a kid, I was for many years a resident alien. Many years later, I learned that resident alien is a Torah term, ger toshav.
Yes.
And I feel like we have not developed yet this concept that like ger toshav is a wonderful, beautiful concept. It means that you are a member of the society. It means that we owe you a lot, but you owe back loyalty. And you can have representation in one way or another, but maybe not the ability to drive the Jewish state. But you have certainly an ability to drive your own destiny with a lot of success. And if you can't muster and handle that amount of loyalty to the Jewish state as an Arab or an other, then you're going to have to find a place somewhere else. But that's the way I understand it. To me, it's very, again, it's kind of simple. It's kind of simple. You're loyal. You live in the Jewish state. You keep your identity. And if not, then you'll have to find a different place. But
yeah, on that level, it's simple. But one of the problems, and this is where I think that the sovereignty movement needs to actually think bigger, which is that to think that you can find a so both moral and workable legal status for the Arabs living in Yudan Shomron without reconsidering the entire structure of our government is a mistake. I mean, if you listen to the left, the whole rhetoric is like, well, in a democratic society, you can't have second-class citizens, right? Which I'm not like, I have mixed feelings about democracy in general, but you see what it is that's how they seize the conversation. It's like, well, since there's nothing legitimate other than the very specific form of democracy. Remember, democratic society is a lie in the sense that, first of all, we're a republic. All democratic societies today are a republic because of the nature of representative democracy, et cetera, which is its own challenge. Second of all, what they really mean is Western liberal egalitarian society, which I'm not necessarily saying is bad or good, but like call it what it is, say what you mean, which is of course not so reflective of even many of the people whose status we're questioning right now aren't necessarily sold into the Western liberal, the sort of like cultural package, right? So what we need to begin to think about, because Ger Toshav is a reflection of the Torah's perspective on how do we deal with the realities of multiple peoples in this land. And remember, the core, even though you spoke about rights, the core of the Torah is what are the obligations? Like you said,
right.
What are our obligations to them? What are their obligations to us? And if people aren't willing to fulfill their obligations, they themselves have defined themselves as not part of society. And the problem with the Western discourse of rights is it's like, well, no, but you owe me. You owe me. Like, I have my rights. You have to, that's just not the way the Torah approaches, certainly not the social questions. So I think there needs to be a bigger push saying that the question of how to, with justice and righteousness, and not just, by the way, what I call tailpipe management. Oh, their life won't be so bad. It'll get better economically. Like, no. We have all these social questions within our country, and they all revolve around the problem of rights versus obligations. So we need to build from the bottom up, and the fact that we are committed to a Torah-driven, righteous relationship to the people that are in our land will be a springboard for recreating a society that's actually reflective of the vision. Mm-hmm. And it may sound nuts, but the truth is, we're Jews.
I think it sounds. I think it sounds. I think it sounds not nuts. I think it sounds totally.
Well, to you, of course, it sounds not nuts.
But even on a very practical level, it sounds normal to me. Like, it doesn't sound tricky to me on a like, it's not like, wow, that's a great idea. I'm like, I could see that working just fine in my mind's eye anyway.
Don't forget, the world's ideal of government today was created by groups of people who sat around and tried to think about how do we do it better.
Right.
So, like, why are we doing that?
Right.
Like, can we sit around and think about how to do it better?
That's such a great point. Sometimes Judaism gets a little bit messed up by that because we have so much tradition and we have so much law and we have so much written that we have so much also energy that keeps going every day that we don't sit back and have a constitutional convention. If anybody like learns the history of the United States, it was an amazing, complex, and beautiful, and very hotly debated, and a very driven process about how to come up with the
Federalist Papers, man. You got to read Federalist Papers,
right? And I find that here in our beloved Israel, I don't even find that the intellectual class is even questioning the system of governance that we have, which is it needs to be questioned.
The intellectual class won't do it. Remember that the reason that it happened in America is because they were still revolutionaries.
Right.
They had broken away. The intellectual class in our society today is wedded to the system of power which exists now. Even the ones who like pride themselves on like, oh, you nationalist power. In the end of the day, that structure is what gives them the life they want, the freedoms that they value.
It'll, so they're too wedded to that structure, even in their opposition to it, to have a real discourse around it. I think it's only a sense of the insanity that, oh yeah, there's a God and we met him at Sinai, and by the way, the universe is an expression of will and not circumstance. It's only that level of stepping out of the picture that at this point is going to allow us to have a real critical eye toward what could be. And I just want to make a comment. When I say insanity, I mean it in a very real and loving way. I mean, just look at me. But I don't want to sound disparaging,
Right. No. And it's the system was created really for when Israel was about 600,000 people, and it's just not meant for a 9 million people big state.
And it was an adoption of the process of the Zionist movement, and by the way, frankly, a bloodless coup in seizing power from the British, as opposed to having the Constitutional Convention. Don't forget that there was supposed to be a Constitutional Convention. It lasted for 2 days, maybe 3. And you know what it did at the end? It declared itself the first Knesset, something that it was not elected to do. And there was really only one person, Hillel Cook, who stood up and said, that was a coup. Did anybody else see that was good? Everyone else was like, well, I don't know. I mean, I'm a member of Knesset now. That sounds good to me.
Right. Yeah. Well, in some ways we are victims of our own success, and that success leads to certain bourgeois, and bourgeois leads to not willingness to change. But at the same time, there's going to be a force that brings it along. I thought that the COVID-19 crisis was one that caused people to think a little bit. We'll see how we come out of it. I thought that the last year and a half of Israeli politics being deadlocked and without a government would have caused something. But interestingly enough, we came out with a big government, a very, very big government. People laugh at it.
That's a kind word.
It's a bloated government, but maybe a stable one. Which has
benefits.
It certainly does. Stability in itself allows for a lot of good things to happen.
And a lot of bad things to continue.
And indeed. I think that's actually Netanyahu's mindset. He's like, let's just keep going. Let's just keep going and let's grow what we can grow. And bad things grow along with that. But that's okay because
if one wants to look at him be down the cuff scoot, that's exactly has always been his mantra.
Right.
Punt big questions down the line and just build, grow.
Yeah, that's it. That's right.
My argument at this point though is that that's no longer a sufficient answer.
Right.
Plus, I have some deep questions about personally where his own ego and need for power play into that.
And we always talk about the transition between the kingdom of Joseph or the Mashiach of Joseph, which is the creative juice of building infrastructure, building economy in the Jewish peoples. And then there's the Davidic messianic process, which is to bring into the physical structures, the infrastructure that was created, a more spiritual, a deeper, a more
to fulfill the mission.
Right, to fulfill the mission. What's the word nisgav? How do I say that in English? Like a higher lofty. The loftier ideal. And this Yom Yerushalayim, I guess we are not there yet. But we celebrate the process of being on the way, on the road.
That's why all these holidays that you named, Yom Ha'atzmaut, Yom Lag BaOmer, and Yom Yerushalayim, all fall out in the Omer. These are holidays of process and accepting the fact that Sinai aside, there is no product. And even the Sinai, God gave us the Torah and was like, okay, now spend the rest of your history developing Torah Sheval Peh, right? Meaning it's not an end unto itself. It's the foundation stone of the process of building the world into a vessel that can hold God's presence. That's what we're after.
Rabbi Mike Feuer, I want to wish you a Yom Yerushalayim Sameach, the good kind of Yom Yerushalayim, not the bad kind, right? Is that kind of cool?
Don't worry, I'll be saying olive.
Right. But I'm saying it's amazing that the word Yom Yerushalayim, to me anyway, means something different 2,000 years later. So I want to wish you a happy Yom Yerushalayim Jerusalem Day. Some people call it Jerusalem Liberation Day or Reunification Day. Other people call it that. But to short, Jerusalem Day. I want to recommend everybody visit your website, jewishstory.co, which houses all the stuff that you do, including your counseling, but also the Jewish Story Show, which is also found on the Land of Israel Network, which right now is covering the prelude to the 6-Day War, which is a very powerful thing. Of course, you might want to also mention some of the sources that you use. There are so many important books, including Michael Oren's book, 6 Days of War, and fantastic book. And also one of my favorite books, which is The Prime Ministers.
Yeah.
By Yehuda Avner, one of the great books. Great book. So, folks, check out jewishstory.co. And if you want to see some of the great bottom lines, successes of the 6-Day War, come and visit us at Hebron, hebronfund.org. We'll take you there virtually or in real life, hopefully soon, as we say next year, in person. And so come and visit us. And, of course, help us continue to build Hebron, the Jewish community of, which is only second to Yerushalayim Yer Kodesh, but it's the story of the fathers and mothers. And, of course, visit me at YishaiFleisher.com, where we're trying to build Israel together, whoever we are, wherever we are. Certainly Jews in the diaspora are part of the story. We're all part of the story. Wherever we are, we could take a step forward towards making Jerusalem Day really the big. Maybe there'll be yet a third Jerusalem Day, right? There'll be a third year of Yerushalayim.
There will be.
There'll be a third kind of Yom Yerushalayim.
One way or the other.
So happy Yom Yerushalayim and Shabbat Shalom, Rabbi Mike Feuer. Thank you so much for being with me here on the show.
Shabbat Shalom, Yishai. Always a pleasure.
God bless you, folks, wherever you are. Stay tuned, stay strong, stay connected. Happy Yom Yerushalayim. Happy Yom Yerushalayim, Rabbi Mike.
Happy Yom Yerushalayim.